Well, it's good to connect, man. So let before we get into Philly 3, I want to start our journey with 6 years ago. This pandemic changed our lives, changed the way that musicians approach so many things.
Hmm.
How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you make music and roll today?
Yeah, so that COVID certainly changed things dramatically for everyone in the arts. Of course, tons of venues shut down, and I would say generally whatever opportunities were there before were probably cut in half on the other end of it. Um, and it has been a difficult time to then chase down those remaining opportunities because, well, for the first couple of years, a lot of these venues were like, yeah, we had a waiting list of all these artists that we were planning to work with, and uh, you know, it took a long time before I felt that. I mean, who's to say what normal is, but we sort of found our new normal with the current state of the jazz industry. But yeah, COVID for me, I was doing a lot of online teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing 35 hours a week of Zoom lessons.
So Philly 3 is your debut. It is a very powerful out of the gates album. It's always a big deal when you come out the first time and put a full album out.
Mm,
What was your kind of conceptual idea for what you wanted to give all the ears?
sure. Yeah, Joe, I do want to just correct you slightly. So this is my trio's first record.
Gotcha. That's
Um,
that's what I should have said. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
mm,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. I myself have recorded and released a couple of projects
yeah.
in the past. But yeah, in terms of so I do have some practice with it and had me thinking sort of big picture, like how do I want to share this music with the world? What do I want it to look like? What kind of a splash do I want to make? And so yeah, I definitely put a lot of thought into that. And Philly 3, I called it Philly 3 in in part to pay homage to the, great lineage of musicians that we have from Philly, and in part to just mark a period in my own life. I don't know how much longer I'll be living in Philly. It's quite possible that this is home for the foreseeable future. It's quite possible I'll be leaving in a few years off to another city. And I've, in my life, I have been fairly nomadic, both as a child and as an adult. And so, yeah, I figured, maybe one day I'll move to London and record a quintet album, and that album can be called London Five, and it'll sort of be a nice way of like cataloging whatever it is that I'm doing at the moment. But yeah, these two guys mainly who I've been working with over the past couple years, Dan McCain on bass and Kyon Williams on the drums. It's been really just a pleasure to dive deeper and deeper into this music with them, and it's getting tighter and stronger and more interesting. And yeah, the music I think speaks for itself. We're trying to, like I say, pay homage to the tradition and also recognize, hey, it's 2026. We're still making jazz music. Let's keep it fresh.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
I hope they enjoy listening to some musical storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You you know, it's interesting you bring up, this art form we call jazz and continuing to evolve with it and pushing the envelope. If Miles Davis came back, if somehow he was frozen and he came back and he could see what's going on in the world of jazz, how do you think he would feel? What do you think his thoughts would be on the modern jazz landscape?
Well, first, I think he'd pat himself on the back and say, "Wow, I did a pretty good job.
That's
People still
right.
seem to like my music."
Yeah.
Um, so I think he'd be thrilled with that aspect of things. And in some ways, jazz is stronger than it ever has been in terms of how widespread it is. How many jazz programs are out in the world. It seems like more people are playing than ever before, and the level with which people on the whole are playing is pretty darn high. Like you can go to many cities across the world and find like truly excellent players. So I think from that perspective, jazz is in a fantastic place. Miles, of course, was quite a prolific visionary and was always pulling the music along with him. I think he'd be interested in this split that we have where you've got one school of people who thinks that jazz is a kind of music that needs to be preserved and it's a historical music, and there's a lot of people making great jazz music like that, and there's a lot of people who, like myself, want to keep pushing the art form forward. And you know another thing that's an interesting question is, of course, that word jazz, right? You ask 50 different jazz musicians what that word means, and you'll get 50 different answers,
Yep.
and no one of them is correct.
Yeah, for sure. And some people don't even want that term to be used.
Oh, absolutely.
Like with Nicholas Payton, he wants Black
Yeah.
American music, that kind of a thing. Gary Bartz. So let's go back to your roots. Where were you born and raised? Are you originally from Philly?
No, I'm not. So I was my parents immigrated to the States from the UK.
Okay.
And so I was born in California, but I didn't really live in California. I moved to Pittsburgh as a kid and then to
Wow.
Boston. And I would say Boston is probably, if I had to sort of claim one city as my hometown, Boston is where I went to middle school and high school and college.
So
So
how did music become your life? How did the piano, how did jazz, how did all of this kind of become your career?
yeah, I started taking piano lessons at a young age and really loved it. And then when I was in middle school, I joined my middle school jazz band, which frankly was not very good. Um, but I did have one student who's a couple years older than me, a kid by the name of Paul Bloom, who I don't believe he's full time doing music anymore, but Paul happens to be one of the best young jazz pianists in the country. He went on and did, some national programs when he was in high school, and really inspired me and showed me this new way of connecting with the instrument that I was not familiar with. Like I already knew I loved piano. I was already pretty good at it, but Paul was definitely on another level, and he was doing all this stuff that I found to be a lot more interesting than what I was already doing. So, he introduced me to his teachers, and we'd be showing each other recordings, things of that nature. And yeah, he made a very big impact on me early on.
So, who were some musicians' albums that you were listening to that was influencing the way that you approach not only the piano but the bandstand?
Do you mean right now, currently,
Well,
or are
no,
you?
when you were young, when you were getting your chops going and finding your voice.
Sure. So I also studied at New England Conservatory prep school. So they, on Saturdays, basically, I assume this is still the case because it was a thriving program back when I was doing it. But on Saturdays, back in the day at least, the New England Conservatory would just open its doors to high schoolers and middle schoolers from around the Boston area, and you could go and take classes, and that would bring together on a weekly basis many of the most talented and also like most enthusiastic students about music. So we'd be sharing all sorts of things with one another. A lot of it was the important tradition, right? All the Miles records, Duke, you name it. You go back and you're talking with another pianist, and you start talking like, "Oh yeah, I've been really checking out Stride, and listen to a lot of Fats Waller and James P. Johnson," and then you go down a YouTube rabbit hole and discover Willie the Lion Smith and whatnot. And then there's this other campus students who are, really interested in the more modern stuff. And, that was sort of an exposure to bands like Kneebody, for example. I remember was a band that came up when I was like, I don't know, 15 in one of those classrooms. And, kids would get to do presentations on whatever it is that they were the most excited about. And so you hear some really, really cool stuff and a huge variety as well.
So, what was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
That's a great question. Going back in the catalog here, I
Yeah.
would say honestly, probably again, I'd credit my buddy Paul for that. As a young kid, seeing this kid who's like literally 2 years older than me playing the same instrument that I play on sometimes, and he's just crushing it, doing
Yeah.
things I didn't know that was possible. And of course, on reflection, Paul was, a really, really talented kid, but he wasn't playing at the highest of levels. But that was enough for me in that moment to feel inspired, certainly.
So, what do you like the best about being a professional musician? What gets you up every day? What pushes you to evolve and to love what you do?
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of things. Mainly it's just how beautiful making music is.
Yeah.
It's such a pure and special experience, and it gets even better the deeper in you get. And I always find that work pays off in a really just fulfilling way in a vacuum. And then, like when you get to share it with people, that just makes it exponentially better.
So, what have you learned from, the elders and the luminaries that you've shared the bandstand with, or that you've been around or that you've learned from? I mean, I know they aren't, some of them are overt about offering advice, but it's more about an aura. It's more about kind of being a part of what of their lineage, their history. What have you learned about either your voice in this music or the jazz community by being around them?
Sure. Yeah. So some of the most impactful elders on myself would be there's this guy named Hal Crook, who
Yeah.
perhaps you've heard of.
Oh yeah.
Hal was, among many things, an extremely prolific instructor at Berklee College of Music, where I studied. And yeah, Hal kicked my butt like nobody ever has before. And he really gave me a fearlessness on stage. Hal was very, very intimidating in his classrooms. And I think he did that on purpose to sort of challenge his students to grow to, take that head on and be fearless in your decision making. And, you know, it's this funny balance of you really have the utmost respect for this person and really, really value all of their feedback. And yet in the moment that you're making music, you cannot care about it, right? You have to just connect with the music and ask the music, what does that need? How can I serve that the best right now? So how was a huge influence on me in that regard. Um, and then, I've another person who comes to mind is Mark Zaleski, who is a sax player based out in the Boston area. His brother is Glenn Zaleski. I don't know Glenn very well, but Mark is someone who I'm happy to be able to call a friend now. And yeah, he got me started on sort of booking my own shows and trying to engage with this music professionally as an artist. I would say that's one thing that as many as much as I was saying earlier, all of these cities around the world have great jazz musicians. There's not necessarily prolific jazz artists who are going around touring, performing under their own names, recording music all around the world. And so being able to interact with people like Mark was very helpful.
So was it always going to be music for you? Did you always know that this was going to be the career, this was going to be your life?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one more step into that question. When you start dreaming and you start thinking that you're going to be a musician, you have this idea of what your career is going to be like, what it's going to be like to be a professional musician.
Mm.
And then there's the reality of it. What was the difference between that idea of what you thought this life was going to be like and what it's turned out to be?
Yeah, I thought growing up that if I got to be a musician, then I would get to play a lot of music. And that's true on some days, right? But as it turns out in 2026, being a professional musician means that you are a lot of things, wearing many, many hats. And Yeah, I remember sitting in math class as a kid thinking like, I don't really care about this quadratic formula. Like I'm just thinking about polyrhythms or, singing these melodies to myself in class. Like, won't it be so great when I don't have to worry about things like that? And, now all of the things I do as an adult, I have an understanding of how they fit into the big picture of my life and why they are all important for me to engage in. But yeah, I certainly thought I was going to be playing more music and, maybe doing a little bit less coordinating of, you know, do they have a drum set for us at this venue on this date? What time is load in at this venue on this day? Oh, shoot, do we have the hotel reservations for that night? Things of that nature.
Yeah. So, the one thing about living in America today is that there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of weird things going on from immigration all the way down.
Mm.
And musicians have this ability, this gift to give audiences a level of kind of getting out of that mindset, getting out of the headlines, feeling something that will make them feel good about things. Maybe some more solidarity with being in this country and as a people. Are you cognizant? Is that a part of something that you're doing actively as you create and present music to people?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And myself and my bandmates, I feel I can speak on behalf of them in this statement. Like, we're in the thick of it, right? Yeah, we're on stage and it feels like we're, just sort of playing this music and delivering whatever messages that we're delivering. But when we're off stage, like we're in the thick of it, we got car payments and, rent to make and all of these things that we're dealing with as well. Um, and of course, immigration. Like I told you, I'm an immigrant. For those of you who may be just listening rather than watching, I've got a medium complexion. A lot of people think I'm Latino, and who knows what that could mean coming across the wrong immigration officer on a certain day. And of course, like yeah, these are all things that we are not exempt from and all that. But yes, certainly for me, music is first and foremost like a celebration of life and all the great things that we have, and a way to bring people together. And yeah, that's something I'm keenly aware of, and that goes into a lot of my song titles and the music that I write.
Yeah.
The first tune on the record is called Persistence. I I wrote that one in advance of a show at Blues Alley in DC. I have a lot of people who I know in DC who were affected by like all the Doge layoffs. And, these are people who are in my circle who were, working at nonprofits and doing things for education, really noble causes. And I wanted to bring that tune to them to just as a message of solidarity, like just keep at it.
Yeah.
This is a time where we gotta keep our heads down and keep fighting those good fights. Um,
Absolutely.
and then there's lots of other stuff that is on the record that's just fun. It's meant to feel good. It's meant to put a smile on your face. It's meant to be very wholesome, and yeah,
Yeah.
all of that stuff is important.
So why do you love this art form we call jazz?
Well, why wouldn't I?
That's the
No,
question.
it's 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 got everything that you want it to have, you know. And of course, like we were talking about earlier, that label jazz is not one that myself nor most artists actually care too deeply for.
Yeah.
Um, it's that broad label of jazz, I think, encapsulates a lot of the music that inspired me and brought me into wanting to do this professionally and become an artist myself. But do I care if you call my music jazz? I mean, no, I'd love to play the Newport Jazz Festival, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But I don't care if you listen to the record and say it's jazz. Um, but yeah, the elements of groove. I love a swing groove. Like
Yeah.
I really have always just deeply connected with that. And that's something that exists, I think, primarily in jazz, although other genres do take that on. Um, the improvisation and spontaneity element of, look, we got to be in the space together, or this recording captures like one version of what this could have been. I find that particularly exciting. And just, the I've always been fascinated by the masters of this art form and the particular type of musicianship that goes into becoming a master of jazz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one performance, jazz or otherwise, where would you go? What would you love to see with your own eyes?
Mm. Well, the fact that you're limiting me to one is perhaps the hardest part of answering this question. Um, I would say, as a pianist, one of my biggest influences is Oscar Peterson,
Yeah.
and I never got the chance to see him live.
Yeah.
I can't remember what year Oscar passed away. It was after I was born, but I think he was retired from performing by the time I was, discovering jazz music.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've watched so many of his live videos on YouTube and
Yeah.
listened to I believe I've listened to all of his discography several times over. If I haven't, it's because I unfortunately missed something while I was, pursuing it all.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'd say going to see one of his shows. I don't have one in particular that
Sure.
I feel like I needed to go see. But yeah,
He would be
he's
the
up
one.
there for sure.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everyone you play with on the bandstand, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. Um, I was not prepared to answer that. I have no idea. Who do I think I am? Who do you think you
Who
are,
do you think
James?
you are?
I view myself as just a guy trying to spread joy, you
Yeah,
know, connect with people wherever he can in as many ways as possible and just, lead a beautiful life.
I love it. So Philly 3 is the new trio album. If anyone wants to pick it up, I mean they can stream it, but if they want to get a copy that will benefit you or catch you live, any of the good business, where do they go?
Yeah, so catch me live and buying a CD in person is the best way to do that. Um, I don't know at what point you're planning to release this, but
By next week I'll have it out.
okay. Um, so by next week, what do we got? We're going to be in March 7th. We're in Rock Hall, Maryland. And then the following weekend, March 20th, we're in Plainfield, New Jersey. 21st, we're in Concord, New Hampshire. 22nd, we're in Albany, New York. Those are our upcoming performances after this is released. Although I'll let you know, Joe, we're tomorrow heading out to North Carolina, playing at the Sharp Nine Gallery on
Okay.
Saturday and Sunday, which is a beautiful venue as well.
Yeah.
Um, then, yeah, all the ways that someone wants to listen are helpful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, as an artist, you gotta just be reaching people in every way, and so the music is out on all platforms. If your listeners are thinking to themselves, okay, well, I have Spotify, that works, great, but what can I do that's going to support the artist the best? Bandcamp is the platform that is the most artist friendly of all of them.
Totally. And I will put those links in the show notes. James, great to meet you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking a minute. I'd appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Joe. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you bet.
Neon Jazz.